Life doesn't come with a reset button, but for those living with a traumatic brain injury, even explaining what's happening on the inside of the brain can feel impossible. Today on Life Rewired, we're joined by Dan Avasar, and he's a survivor who went, so far as to earn a PhD in neuropsychology to understand his own injury. Let's dive into the complexity of the brain injury and the power of reclaiming your mind. It all starts right after this.
Laughter leads the way through the darkest, hardest days. Hope still burns, it won't retire. This is me, my life rewired. I was broken, now I'm whole. Wrote new chapters for my soul. Not the end, just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.
Today, our guest is Dan Avasar, and I'm so genuinely excited to get to know you, Dan. Your journey from surviving a traumatic brain injury to earning a PhD in neuropsychology, that's nothing short of remarkable. And I'm looking so forward to diving into your story, your research, and the powerful ways that you're helping understand the injury and helping others. So yeah, let's get into it, Dan.
Thank
Welcome to
you.
the program.
Thanks. And thanks for having me on here. And just technically for the record, it's neurophysiology,
Oh, and I've
which is
completely
very
read it.
rare. Yeah. No, but everyone makes that mistake because I only know like a few hundred neurophysiologists that do that, studying the circuitry, cellular, subcellular, the real physiology of the brain. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting that it's a very diverse group of people that's doing that. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you had your accident.
Yes.
I want to get into that first before we go any further.
Of course. Of
So,
course.
take us back. How did the
Um,
accident happen?
I was 18 years old. I had just started college. I remember when I started college, I was all about like, well, maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do this. And I got in as a math major. I was very academically driven, but I don't know. I had just general interest. And then third week of my undergrad, I was coming back from the first Coachella concert festival, and my friend's car got in an accident. I was in the back seat, and it flipped and landed on
Mm,
my head and basically crushed. I guess crushed my head in. I don't know. I don't remember.
yeah.
The car flipped, and my friends were in the front seats, and they got out, and I didn't. And what they say is like police were there in minutes. Someone must have called. A helicopter airlifted me to Cedar Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles
Hmm.
within like an hour, and I had my skull removed, subdural hematoma, and they removed about a third of my skull. I mean, I have the plate is right there, and then just this long. I was in the ICU, and then recovery, and then for the amount of time I was in there was relatively short. I think I was home maybe it was like 38 days or 30 some days, and then it's a long story at that point. But I had all these problems. My mom says I was like a toddler, and I
Mm,
had double vision, and I had this. Basically, my cognition was gone,
right.
and the speech therapist I worked with in that time helped me. They say that like at a certain point they were doing all this work with me, and it got my thinking back, got my reasoning back, and I don't remember that. And maybe that's like 3 or 4 months into the home. It was outpatient work, but she would come to our house, and she also helped my mom try to train my thinking. And
Yeah.
when my reasoning or thinking came back is when I remember sort of things starting. That's probably like 4 months after my brain injury. So I had the double vision where it was like a split sort of two
Hmm.
worlds, and I moved. It was because of my cranial nerves that were damaged. So I moved in a way to try to get symmetrical worlds because if it was asymmetrical, it would really bothered me. So I'd walk around like with this weird gait, and then once I remember the cognition not working, the that same therapist was still there. It was towards the end of my work with her, but it was like, can you do an algebra problem? Can you do a basic math? And I couldn't. And when I tried to think, it was like initiating the thought, like turning the key of
Yeah.
initiating the thought. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. Then I would get into the fatigue. And so she got me working with like really basic addition, single digit over time. And then that led to all the cognitive fatigue because I couldn't do it
Yeah.
over time. So it was just this I call it the baby steps, but really it's you injure these capacities, and the work to even do the most simple thing was all I
Hmm.
could do. And so there was about 2 years I was at home, and I went back to school, meaning I went back to community college to do the classes I had done in high school. and it's just this crazy process of rebuilding my thought. The also at that time with the double vision, it was experimental therapy at the time. I guess the prism glasses weren't out yet or something,
Yeah.
and they were giving me all these exercises to restore my cranial nerve function. I remember really attacking it, and it was some, this is 1999, 2000, so it was high tech for then. But
Yeah.
I got the double vision to improve, and then the double vision went away. But then if I pushed my cognitive limits, the double vision would come back. Plus, it would be double vision returns, then the vertigo, nausea, and then the headaches, and then the fatigue would be like the next step. And then
Yeah.
I also in that time I remember realizing that my inner self was gone, and that doesn't make sense except my outer self of thought was gone and my inner thought was gone. And to me, it was very, very clear, but I had the feeling for many months before I was able to put a name on it.
Hmm.
And those 2 years at home was very hard, and I pushed and pushed and pushed, and you can't really push, so you push to like where you go too far, and then you learn, okay,
Yeah.
that's too far, so then you push. Anyway, I was able to go back to college a few years later, and I was, I don't want to curse, I was completely obsessed with getting my life back. And when I went back to school, it took about 2 years to go back, and everyone's like, "You're not ready yet," but I had to. And then
Hmm.
my life in college was like, the going to the store, the doing the basic things that were once I had already done in those first 3 weeks. I was like, that became the drill to do all those things, to find
Yeah.
the store, to navigate it, and so it just was like a weird brain injury life. And across those 7 years, I learned to push but not too far, and to what was the next step? What was the next step? And then
Hmm.
it took about 7 years for me to regain my cognition. And by the end of it, I was like, whoa! Like I never met anyone that understood what I was dealing with, including the doctors. The vision therapy helped me in that frame. The cognitive speech therapist helped me with beginning that process, and also she understood the fatigue, and her encouragement was always don't push too far, don't push too far. Meanwhile, I still did for took me about
Yep.
4 or 5 yeah, it took me about 4 or 5 years to really stop that. And then when I really stopped that was when the fifth, sixth, seventh years. I remember like, whoa, I'm leveling up, I'm regaining, and then I was like, I'm normal. I'm adamantly swearing that I'm normal. I don't want to talk about my brain injury. I'm like, look at me, I'm normal. Look at me, look at me. And then I got into neuroscience to try to make sense of it, because the whole time, maybe not the whole time, but towards those later years, I was like, what has happened to me? And I
Yeah.
couldn't find answers. I couldn't find. So it's a long story, obviously, but when I got into the neurosciences, I was trying to make sense of it, and I was learning about all these systems, and then I got deep into that like circuitry level, and
Hmm.
did. I was a tech for a few years, and then I did my PhD, and it wasn't until my PhD qualifying exams and I had finished that I began to try to talk to the other people about what happened, and then I realized they also don't understand brain injury. They're scientists, they're
Hmm.
brilliant people, but they have a misview of brain injury. And this is already like 12 years after, so I'm still having problems, but I learned how to work on them, and I just lived this brain injury baby stepping life, and the fatigue went away by that point, which was really good. I
Yeah.
had all these phases, like the first 8 years, all these crazy phases. And I'm kind of generalizing here, but then at the 17-year mark, when I was in a postdoc and I was so devoted to it, and I was like, why am I doing this? I hate this. It's always been about my brain injury. Did I realize also that I didn't ever really have feelings about my brain injury, and that led to what I say
Mm.
the last 7 years has been alexithymia with brain injury, is the inability to access feelings. And it was like this landslide of all the emotions came out, and then I got out of academia, and then I was like, it's always been my brain injury, and I had all this anger and the depression, and I wasn't suicidal, but I definitely at that point I was like, I wish I hadn't lived, because I could have not lived. And
Yep.
then I went past that, and then it led to a support group, and it led to me talking to other brain injury people, and finally I was like, okay, these are people I can relate with, except of course everyone's different. But then eventually during the COVID isolation, that led to the podcast, which is let's talk to brain injury people in as much detail as we can about the nature of what's injured in them. And I've just been refining that for years now. So
Yeah.
that's a long story short.
You said something in there that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned how hard it was to put a label on it to describe
Hmm.
that feeling. Anybody that has a brain injury knows exactly what you're talking about. But
Yes.
to describe that to other people that have no idea, even professionals, you
Yeah.
know, doctors that go to school that learn this, that study this, they only get a small glimpse into what it's really like to live inside a damaged brain, for lack
Right.
of better
Right.
terms. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I'm sure you have. You'll have one day where you're just like, I mean, boy, you're just firing it off. Everything's perfect. And then the next
Hmm.
day it's like, how do I make this cup of coffee? I've got to go through all the steps in my head. And it's like, it should be something simple to just do,
Yeah.
but you have to really think about it. And it's just like, to explain that to people, it blows their mind.
And they don't believe you, and it's very frustrating. And it took me about the first 3 years um, to recognize that I'm not getting help and I'm not being understood. So I stopped trying to find help. My mom was, kind of like she saved me. She was able to find the helps that did work, but there was so many attempts to find other doctors and other clinicians, and it just failed. And it was so frustrating that I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm done with this. And during that time, I realized I'm gonna hide, and by hiding, I just didn't try to explain. I had this like poker face. It's like quiet, look,
Yep.
and I don't say anything because they don't understand what I'm dealing with. And so what you just said is so. I have a term for that. I call it the constantness that changes,
Hmm.
because the brain injury, and that came from discussion with other brain injury people. But you have all these problems, and then the changes, and then when you have the good days, you're firing. When you have the bad days, over the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh year, my bad days became less and less and less. And I
Yeah.
can still get that. I can still I can still be in that state if I really everything's going bad and no sleep for many days. But I haven't been
Hmm.
like that in a long time. And yeah, it's the nature of brain injury, and I've met many people that it's like one of the features of brain injury, and it's really hard to explain. When I got out of academics and I realized it was about brain injury, I started journaling, I started writing, and I had these like process of trying to describe vomiting out what had happened, and then I would like refine the vomit, and it sounds gross because it was, and it didn't make sense, and then eventually it led to this is actually the right way to say it or the best way to say it, and I'm still on that process. So yeah,
Yeah. Not to change gears, but I want to go back just a little bit.
please.
Prior to the brain injury, were you looking at going into the medical field? Was that on your horizon, or did this completely change everything for you?
It was, yeah. I had really an open slate. Like I remember, I loved biology and chemistry, and I liked math. But I thought if I could get in as a math major, I could pick something else. I liked political science, I liked philosophy, and my dad's like, you should be a lawyer. And then some of my other friends, and I think that looking back, maybe I would have gone the pre med route. Except I don't know. I just was like excited. Like I was like, now it's like now my life is beginning, and I've been working so hard. And I had all this like excitement for life. So I didn't have a pre focus. I definitely didn't think about the brain, but I
Yeah.
was interested in psychology, and I was interested in like the human nature of humans. So I remember thinking about psychology. I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. It was, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I find that people that have their brain injury, it's just like they're, they come to that fork in the road.
Hmm.
And the people that I've talked to in the past, they were going to go this way. And then the brain injury happens, and it's just like, whoa, now we're going this way.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to me. I just find it fascinating. So I just thought I would ask you that question.
No, I
Yeah.
appreciate
So
that.
so when you okay, you went through your recovery, and then you said, I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to get a degree. What was some of the challenges that you had? Did the professors did you acknowledge to them, hey, I've got a brain injury. I need some accommodations here, or just how did that occur?
So that, what you said is maybe an over, or let me explain. The first 2 years when I was back home, my mom would drive me to these community college classes, and I was like, just to get, yeah, there was a ton of problems, and there was this change over time that was about 7 years. For example, getting information into my mind. I was retaking classes I had done very well in, so I could follow the logic of the instructor until I hit the fatigue, but I could listen. But if
Hmm.
I tried to take notes, I couldn't take notes. And then when I had the notes from the professor and from the note taker, I couldn't get the information into my head. And that was one weird problem. So what it meant was recopying the notes and then recopying, and there's about 8 to 12 recopyings to get the information in my head, and then the gears of thought to get that to happen. It wouldn't happen at first, and then it was like so slow and like a mental mud. Also with the steps, because math is a great example. By the way, I was in this state for those first 7 years. So the 2 years at home and then being back in undergrad, I was using my undergrad to rebuild what I had lost, and I used what the speech therapist and what the vision therapy taught me to just work with what I could and then repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, and then work with what I could, repeat it, repeat it, and then when I get too far, I would crash, and then I would sleep for days, and then so it was this weird process. But getting information into my head, getting the gears turning, getting step one and step two to happen, steps wouldn't happen. So I had to step one over and over until I get to step one, then
Hmm.
step two, and then drilling step one and two together. And it was just this really weird time. So I had a lot of testing where I was like getting 10, 20% on these tests. But I had the information in my head at least. And then the 10, 20% became like 30, 40. And eventually like got to like 50, 60, 70%. I'm like, okay, like at least I'm thinking and at least I couldn't do the homework because I spent all the time trying to get the information in my head and that the gears to happen, but the gears in themselves were still there, which was
Yeah.
big. And I remember that speech therapist that I worked with telling me like, at least you have that, and at least you have that. And I was so angry. I was like, what do you mean? Like, at least I have that. I've met people that have lost that since, so I get it. But to get the gears to happen, to get the thought to happen, to not hit the fatigue. So I got all the disability services advantage that I could, but it was still like once I got back to school, the getting to classes, the getting there was already burning me out, and then
I can
studying and
imagine.
working. I was attacking it all the time with the energy that I had. I learned to nap and exercise. I do this 30-minute treadmill or 30 minutes on the bike was my main thing, and I'd blast music and I would just like clear my head, and then work another 15. I wanted to work for hours, but I couldn't because I'd hit the
Yep.
fatigue. So everywhere I went was like this analogy I came up with was like you enter into a dark room and there's a cliff and you don't know where the cliff is, but I
Mm.
would keep falling over the cliff. So then I start entering like I'm blind, like I'm reaching with a stick trying to find
Yeah.
where's too far, there's too far. Now I called it the 60 to 80% rule, where like here's half and then here's 60%, and I just lived a life like that, and I used my undergrad to rebuild the process of thought, and I was so angry and I felt, the real loss. There was the loss of self, but there was the loss of I'm an academic. I'm a thinker. I love math. I love thought, and I can't even think. So I was just attacking it. And then the other thing was I'm pretty good at like I know how to talk to people, and I didn't injure my
Hmm.
ability to talk to people. So I would act normal. I would pretend. I wasn't being social for many years, but I would just like pretend to be normal, go cafeteria, and then just study and I was rebuilding thought. I had the what's the term derealization, like the world didn't feel real, and also my inner me was lost. But I'd say 5 or 6 years into that process, before the cognition really came back, that went away, and I was like, now I'm used to my new inner self, and I like accepted it. But when my thought became fluid, and I could take thoughts, put them in my head, manipulate them, and then put something out, I was like, oh my god! And then but I was still repeating it, and then the next problem was memory, which I still have, by the way. But it
Hmm.
was repeating words, repeating words, repeating words, trying to memorize the words to then learn the definitions was really weird. But yeah, so it's been that continued through grad school, and then when it's like okay, now I'm really good. I just didn't want to talk about it, so it was a weird many phases in this process.
Would this be a fair assessment?
Yeah.
I want to say that possibly being in school, going through that, was a great way to have therapy and learning at the same time.
my undergrad was my therapy because I was so focused on regaining thought. So although I could never do everything, I could do enough. And then the rethought, I had like eight over the first 7 years. I had eight leveling ups. Where like, okay, now I can do this, and okay, now I can do it. And the leveling up, I couldn't even label what, but it was. As I've interviewed many people who've had this, it's like all of a sudden I can do this, and then now this is my new baseline. The other thing
Hmm.
about it, which is sad, and now I feel the pain and the shame because I was so ashamed with what I couldn't do, but I never felt good about those regainings. I never felt because it was so hard. I was really alone with it, and I just like assumed I need to get back to baseline. And so
Yeah.
as I improved, I wasn't feeling good. I was feeling like I'm in a hole and I'm digging out,
Hmm.
and I'm not. The amount of work was a tremendous amount of work, and I didn't feel good about it. And then once I was good enough to kind of be like how I was, I'm just like I'm never talking about this again. And then I was like that for many years until the emotional. People thought I had a breakdown from the work, but it
Mm.
was the emotionality of it always being a brain injury, and no one understanding what I was dealing with. And then when I went to a
Yep.
therapist, he's like, "What are you talking about?" And then that led to the journaling. And so that's like already 17, 18 years after my brain injury, and yeah, it was just I'm 20. October 11th will be 26 years, and it
Wow.
continues to change. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel
Uh,
like it's an ever, I don't want to say evolving, but it's a life journey really to me.
yeah.
You know,
And it,
I'm only 5 years out, and I
right.
still have stuff great days, I have still bad days.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the most frustrating thing for me, and I'm sure you
Yeah.
deal with this as well, is the people that go, "Oh, you're not better yet."
Yeah.
You
Oh,
just want to
yeah.
strangle those people.
Yeah. Sorry, the lighting just shifted in here, so I have some shadow going, like the
You're
sun just came
fine.
out. But yeah, I wanted to punch them in the face. I wanted to
Hmm.
just and that's that led to the hiding it even more because I didn't
Yeah.
want to have to deal with it, and I just here's a crazy example with my podcast and the talk series. And when I got out of academia, everyone's like, you're burned out, get a job. Why are you? Most people don't continue in academia anyway, and
Yeah.
so why are you so hung up about this? And I'm like, no, it's about my brain injury. And then when I started recording, started putting it out, my mom and I sat down and we had this crazy argument. And my parents are compassionate people and very loving, and I had a great childhood, but they didn't know how to think about the brain injury, and so we never talked about it. And it took like 17, 18 years to have that discussion even begin. And
Yeah.
then once my mom listened to the podcast, she was like, oh, okay, I actually never knew what you were dealing with. Oh, the lady still checking. Oh, and then it was like, then she's like, I never knew what you were dealing with. So she said, I didn't talk to you about it so that you didn't know about it. And in my head, I was like, I can't talk to anyone else about this. So I wish it would have been different, but it took 18 years to begin that discussion with some of my family, and then it was a relief, but I had to also learn how to feel relief about it. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's an evolution. It's a very strange progression.
Yeah. I think sometimes family are the ones that have the hardest time to, I don't know if it's denial or what it
Hmm.
is, but it seems like to me they're the ones that have the hardest time understanding what you're going through. Um, my brother, for example, I really don't think he got it until one day
Yeah.
he saw me have a panic attack, and he was like, "Oh, my brother's changed." He physically saw it for himself,
Hmm.
and I think the dots got connected. He's not the same person he used to be. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think sometimes they just have to see it for themselves.
For some people, I think it's a denial plus they can't accept it or they refuse to. And then for others, it's good. They have to see our pain. They have to see our changes. And I got so good at hiding it, which really meant not doing anything and not trying to explain it and not trying to get them to understand it. I just would retreat to my space and not my space on the internet, but just retreat to my room, retreat, get away. And so yeah, it it's hard to ask for help and it's hard to get them to get it. And
Hmm.
that's what led to my podcast. And I've been writing a lot. I mean, I've been writing about this for years, but to find the words to try to explain it because it's so invisible. Every brain injury is different. Um, it's just really hard to put into. It's hard to communicate.
It is. It
Yeah,
is the hardest thing, in my opinion, to communicate. You can
I agree.
explain a broken bone. That's easy. And you can see that. But to explain emotions and how things get so jumbled in our brain, how do you explain that?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it makes
yeah.
sense to us, but, to the, for lack of better terms, let's say the commoner, to the commoner, they have no idea. Like, well, just get over it. And they don't understand that the need for downtime to rest the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm great in the mornings, and then by the time evening rolls around, I stutter and because that they've used all my energy up. Yeah.
And you could try to save your energy, but even that, there's so. By the way, I use the term the unbrain injured, and that came from another brain injured person as well. But the constantness that changes has the good days and bad days, has the day and night cycle, and has the stresses and the ways we get burned out. Where
Mm.
if you hit something that is either you're just not there or able to handle it, or I see that every brain injured person has very specific core problems. They're at the core. If you hit on that, it can just exhaust all your energy in an instant. And I
Absolutely.
had a progression where that went away over those first 7 years, and
Hmm.
I keep referring to those first 7 years because that was the most drastic. Just like the injuries were, the changes and improvements were as strange and so profound. I was like, wow. So I am in a lot better place. But when I did my PhD and when I did my postdoc, I was working all the time, and they value that and they look at that as a good quality. But I was just like trying to do all these circles to do the basic things, and then I made so many mistakes. I remember my PhD advisor, he would be like, "Well, I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that." And I'm like, "That's like the story of my life. Like I make all mistakes. That everyone's like, how can you make a mistake of that?" I'm like, "Look, let's just deal with the problem. Like this is the nature of my. I'm known for that. I still do it.
Yeah. It's a brain injury thing. If you don't have one, you're not going to understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the simplest of tasks is the most hardest of tasks for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Why that happens, who knows? We are still learning about the brain. I don't know if we'll ever figure it completely out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And each one's different. And the in the
Right.
first 4 years, mostly in those first 2 years when I was still at home, I would drill the steps of brushing teeth. I would drill getting dressed. I would drill making a list. I would drill packing a bag. And it was weird, but it was like I can't do this. And I kind of took like a sports approach. Like I need to be able to brush my teeth. And step one to step two to step three. I mean, there's
Hmm.
not that many steps in brushing teeth. Get the toothbrush, put the toothpaste on it. The
Yeah.
movement wasn't the problem. It was the steps of
Yep.
doing it. And uh, you or when I interviewed Anessa, her and I talked about being in the shower, the steps of putting soap and shampoo and getting
Yeah.
out. That was like the weirdest. I had to drill it. I drilled my life to get better
Right.
at taking a shower. Yeah,
There were
yeah,
times I would get in the tub and or the shower
yeah.
and I would get done and I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? You know,
Yes,
obviously get out of the tub. But I had to think about it. And I was like, why am I having to think about getting out of the tub?
yes.
And if I had remembered to get a towel before I get in the tub, that was a win.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
number of
Hmm.
times I've had to yell, and still sometimes, for my wife to say, "Hey, can you bring me a towel?" Something simple that people take for granted that you just do without thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So drill it like every day, 3 attempts to take a bath. Attempts, that's how I was in the beginning, and I wasn't. I don't know why the drilling might come from sports and other habits like learning how to snowboard. It's like you drill the movement, you drill it and you drill it, and then if you don't do that sport for a few years, then you're like all wonky, and then you have to relearn it. That was something I learned as a kid, and so it became, yeah, drill. I'm gonna get my towel. I'm gonna put it there. I'm gonna go in the and I would even do visualization of thought of cooking, of brushing my teeth, and I
Hmm.
think that that can help people. Visualization, people talk about golf and archery and stuff, but visualize taking a
It
bath.
works. I
Yeah,
agree with you on that. When the very beginning, I could not make a recipe. I'd have the recipe and I would look at it and say, okay, I need to get celery salt. And I'd walk across the room and I'm like, when was I supposed to get?
yeah.
So early on, I realized carry the recipe with me.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, okay, celery salt. Here we go. So a simple thing to do, but most people take that for granted.
Yeah. Plus, you have the recipe in your hands, so you know what you're there for.
Right,
Yeah, that's good.
right.
Um, One thing that you said, and I remember, I think we had discussed just by message a while back. I had this hell bent focus to regain what I had lost, and
Mm,
life should have. It would have been easier to shift, but it wasn't. It was a bad thing because it was so hard, and also because I was hiding, and also all the emotions got built up in those years.
yeah,
But to shift, and it's not acceptance, but to shift and work with what you have versus
yeah,
just drilling down to try to regain what I'd lost. That became my focus, and it wasn't a good path. It maybe it had benefits, but it wasn't healthy. It led to a lot of stress and a lot of
true.
suppressed anger. For one, sadness,
Hmm.
pain, a lot of other things too.
Oh yeah, the anger is real. It's very real.
Oh yeah.
I have yet to meet a survivor that doesn't have those moments where they get so angry because you feel like your life was just stolen from you.
Mm,
It's like where
yeah.
did Rob go?
You lost. Yeah, it's a loss of self, loss of life, and right, not loss of life because we're still here. And the other thing is we look when sometimes when I do these podcasts, it's like you look fine, I look fine, and I feel like people be like, "What are you talking about?" I want to have this little like scan like showing all the problems or somehow to demonstrate it.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. But the other thing that I was thinking is I remember the frustration with basic, not being able to add, not being able to
Hmm.
because after I only had that therapy for about 6 months, and I only remember the later half, but the frustration of not being able to do the basic things was the most frustration I've ever experienced. And I've heard clinicians talk about brain injury people have frustration, like a lower threshold for frustration, but it's because everything is so frustrating.
It is.
I, I think it's an accurate response given what we're dealing with.
It is. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, even if paying with cash, there's times that I'm in my head trying to do the math. I'm like, I could do this before my brain injury, and now I'm sitting there going, I'm trying to get two quarters together, and what do I do?
yeah,
it's,
yeah, yeah.
it's easily to be taken advantage of in that situation. So thank God for debit cards.
And then balancing our standards. I'm always running into problems with my wife. I met my wife way after my brain injury, and when I was working so hard in grad school, I think people found that as like, oh, like look at him, he's a hard worker. But really, I was just doing all these loops in my head to get basic stuff done. And I did also work hard. I did, I didn't. I did a real PhD. I did a real postdoc. I've done some really cool research. We could talk about that later if you want. But it was like, what was my point? Oh, so my wife sees what I deal with now. She thinks it's a bandwidth issue because she'll never be able to understand the brain injury stuff. But I
Yeah.
always like have like, okay, this didn't get finished, and this here's a pile, and here's a thing that I should have worked on, and here's how come I didn't balance this or this, and I'll get to it, and then I end up making these lists. I'm almost too list centric because otherwise I'll forget. So it's a very it's a lot of juggling and managing to get
Hmm.
what is considered normal done.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, your wife only knows you from the brain injury. She doesn't know what you're like prior to that.
Right, and she also met me when I was hiding it, which I got very good at. And then years later, when I brought it up to her, which we've been dating a while, when you tell someone you have a brain injury, they don't understand what that means unless they've had it or have a relative. So
Hmm.
that's what led to my podcast ultimately, because I'm like, let's talk, let's get as detailed as we can about the nature of the problems, and then hopefully, example at a time, people will start to see the nature of this. Because although every brain injury is different, it's still brain injury. You're sharing a lot of stuff that I can relate with, and
Hmm.
and yeah, it's there's a lot of commonality there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be? Anyone say that okay, today John Doe gets a brain injury. What would you advise for that person?
Oh, so from the point that they have, yeah, it's so hard to answer that, but I can say that the general things that come up there is like finding help, finding support, finding a way, because many of the people I know in the support groups are on their own,
Yeah.
and that's really horrible. And so that's like, let's say that's like half the people I meet have absolutely no support, and they've been abandoned by their family, or worse, their family turns on them.
Yeah.
So trying to find a way to prevent that um, is essential, if possible. If your family has abandoned you, there's nothing you can do about it. But then trying to find the right helps that are out there and the right supports that are out there. And
Right.
so another big piece is this progression. You know, the first day versus the first week versus the first month, there's
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of change, and I think that's important for the unbrain injured people around them to recognize that someone could be a lot better off 4 or 5 months later. Just be present with them when they're completely out of it, and the fatigue
Yeah.
is so real. The fatigue is a part of the brain injury because
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the energy. So doing very very basic amount of energy, even talking or opening your eyes, can that'll hit your limit at that point. You know, so it's a 6 months later you might be a little bit better, but there's still going to be that limit. It's a really
Yeah.
crazy evolution. Yeah,
Very
it's,
crazy. You're
yeah.
absolutely correct on that.
Um, and then the thing that I've been trying to do within my podcast, but really um, is what I try to do when I meet brain injury people. Is like first I talk to them. What are your core problems? What are you dealing with? And everyone has very different descriptions. And if you look at the stuff that's out there, every brain injury they have like these tables and these lists of all the problems. But someone will say, "No, my problem is this, and my problem is this," and then
Hmm.
when you aggravate those problems, it leads to the other problems. So then in
Yeah.
the end, we all look the same, but we're really not the same. So what is the person's core problems, or maybe they have two or three core problems? How do those interact? And that's where you need to find the help the most, which is really, really hard to do because there's some experts out there and there's some help out there, and many people I've met that get to those right helps. It's a huge difference, and then it takes time. Then it takes a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's super important to get into a support group. It took me 3 years to even look for one.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think the thing that I've figured out the most is yeah, we're all I hate the term we're all in the same boat. No, we're really not. We're all
No,
in
we're
the
not
same waters,
the same. Yeah,
but our
oceans,
boats are different
different. But
shapes and sizes. So
yeah,
but there is a commonality that we all get that moment of feeling alone because the people around us don't experience what we're experiencing. We're doing this
hmm
by ourselves, even though some
hmm
of us have support by a spouse or mom and dad or whatever. But yeah, my biggest thing is get into a support group because talking and figuring out, gee, I'm not crazy. Other people are experiencing XYZ as well, and
yeah.
they're getting better, and there are brighter days ahead. So that's the thing that I force people to do. I just every time I hear somebody like get into a support group, please.
That's really important. I didn't talk to any brain injury person for about 17 years, and I seeked the professionals and the experts. And when they didn't understand what I was dealing with,
Hmm.
I literally thought nobody will ever understand what I'm dealing with, and I'm alone with this. And then I was actually okay with it in a weird way because it was like just isolated. And then I was like, I'm on my own. I have to do this. But
Yeah.
once I went to a support group, then I was like, oh, it. There was a wave of validation that hit me the first day I went. And then the other thing is though, some of the support groups are better than others, and some
Yep.
because we can talk about this, there's a lot of trauma with this.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of, let's say the last 5 or 6 years I've been observing the groups and trying to see what's out there. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of competition, and so some are better than others. It's good just to get the feeling that you're not crazy is easily satisfied, but to get real support sometimes takes a little bit of searching. And
Right.
yeah, it's sad that that's the case. I've decided since we're all humans and we're all traumatized, it's like that comes out, but it's really it's really sad.
I've experienced the same thing. I have found that there's some out there that are very toxic, and
Yeah.
I quickly just goodbye.
Hmm.
Because you want to surround yourself with people who are positive. Now, that's not saying that people are not going to have bad days and they're not going to complain. We're human, you know.
Yeah.
But when you get into a support group and that's the only thing you see is negative, 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 you're not going to get anything out of that. And that's just going to bring you down as well.
Right. And there is a time and a need for the grief, and to
Hmm.
have positive versus negative is not to say that they can be supportive as you feel the grief and feel the pain. It was a brain injury person that helped me even recognize what I ultimately labeled as grief, and then realized it led to sadness. It led to, I didn't ever feel, I don't know if you feel emotions in your body. I had never had that. And then after talking to people and I went to acupuncture, I had this like, it was like a tremoring, like, it's hard to enact, but I would be like, and I'd get all this stuff out of me. And then I felt my heart and my neck would be tight and my back. It's hard to explain, but
Hmm.
then I felt my heart and I was like, what has happened? And I went to a cardiologist. My heart was fine. It was pain. And I didn't, it was like either it was there and I had no awareness, or it wasn't there and I didn't have it in me. And then when I gained access to it, oh my God, like I didn't know how to deal with it. And so brain injury person helped me recognize that it was grief and feel the
Yep.
pieces of it. And um, one friend I have who's brain injured, and he and I both related because we used to have just numb, like no highs, no lows. He called it a Jello basketball, and then the Jello
Mm.
basketball took form, which is the feelings, and that took me years to feel. But it was only other brain injured people helped me to make sense of it and relate with it, and so that it's hard to find the right people, but it's worth it, And
Yep.
um, the being over positive can happen where false positivity or toxic positivity.
Toxic
So that's not good
positivity.
either.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
weird, man. Yeah,
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Toxic positivity is almost as bad as being around a negative person because
yes,
you have to
yeah,
feel all emotions. I'm a very positive person anyway, and I try to not cross that line of the toxic positivity
hmm
because you realize sometimes somebody just needs to get down in the dirt, get dirty, and
and
feel.
really feel it. Yeah, really
Yeah,
feel it.
yeah.
Though all those feelings happened to me starting 17 years, 18 years, 19 years after my brain injury, and I was like this depression, this depth, and all this pain, and
Hmm.
so much pain. And I think it was a wall that I had never hit. And then when I crossed it, there was about 2 years that I would lay at night and I would feel it, and I didn't know how to feel it. And then another brain injury person who I interviewed, this is early in my podcast, that episode was called My Crying Coach. He taught me how to feel and how to cry. And
Really?
I still didn't know how to cry until my daughter, she like has her emotions out fully, and she's 2 now. But it was her and him in these discussions. Then I learned how to cry, and then I had the sticky emotions where they wouldn't go away. And it's just been
Mm,
the evolution is an ongoing process. I had to learn how to cry. I had to learn how to let the feelings happen and then pass. And then I was so overwhelmed by them. And then when it became from overwhelming to I can tolerate it. I was like, okay, that's an improvement. But it was, yeah, it's weird.
wow.
It's a,
It's
yeah,
weird how that happens. 'Cause now, me before my brain injury, you can
yeah.
get me to cry for anything. I was a
Could not.
very,
Yeah,
the walls were up. Okay.
right.
Now, totally the opposite. I could drive down the street and see a homeless person and start crying because they're homeless. I mean, yes,
Mm.
it's sad. My goodness, why am I crying? This is not normal. Well, I'm feeling emotions that I've never felt before. And it's hard to deal with those, or crying at a
You were,
coffee commercial.
yeah. So that part of you was able to just happen and
Yeah.
almost amplified after your brain injury. Yeah.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Hey, before we close this out, I want to give you the
Yeah.
platform, the opportunity to share anything that's on your mind and also answer the question, what's next?
Hmm. with anything that's on my mind, I want to share that. So I took my energy that was from my recovery, and then I was a neuroscientist trying to make sense of it, and now I'm trying to build these two projects. Experiencing my brain is the name of my podcast, where it's experiencing my brain injury, discussion, detailed details, as much as we can about the nature of what are the invisible problems, just because I want to get those examples out, and I really focus on that with brain injury people. Then I have the other side, which is the Building Brain Awareness talk series on brain injured clinicians, the experts. And I'm trying to interview them about what they know, and I see it like as we're in the middle, or what needs to be improved is in the middle. So I have the talk series with the unbrain injured, the deep discussion with the brain injured people. I'm hoping over time to transcribe it and write something out of it. But so much information is there. People who've listened, like one of my therapists who actually learned from me, she said it's like an encyclopedia. And it's not very organized right now, but it's really good content. So I just want to put that out there. And then the what's next is I see the parallels, I see the pieces, I see all these ways. I'm trying to like transcribe it, and almost like I'll have two giant decks of cards that I have to reshuffle and find a way to, I don't know, maybe a blog and then a book, but trying to build this information. And it's not evidence based research, it's experiences, and we're dealing with it. We don't need evidence. We're on this island that's not discovered. We need people to listen to what we're saying in a way that they can believe us, you know? So
Yeah.
that's what I want to turn it into. And I am, the ideas I have now, I didn't have several years ago, so I'm excited about that. But it's, yeah, just I move really slow, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, I want you to send me all resources, links that you want to have people have available to them, like to your podcast or what have you.
Cool. Podcast and YouTube channel, those are my two things. So yeah, I'll send it to you.
So those will be linked in the description. So all you need to do
Okay.
is just go into the description and click on it. You'll go right to Dan's website and his YouTube channel. Um, I don't know what else to say other than thank you so much for
Thank,
giving us your time today. I'm very, very much appreciative of that. And
thank you.
if you
Thanks
would
for, yeah, thanks for having me.
hang on the line before we after we get off here, because I have something else I wanted to run by you real quick. But
Cool, cool.
guys,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us this week. If you would please hit the subscribe button and leave us a comment. We'd like to answer your questions as well. So if you have questions, even for Dan, we'd be more than happy to answer those for you in future podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
Great.
thank you for joining us. We will see you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you, Rob.
Just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.